This is a major scale. This is a minor scale. Each of these scales are used by composers and musicians to conjure up different emotions in listeners. We might think of the minor scale as dark and sad, sometimes even foreboding if we were to use the harmonic minor, which raises the 7th degree of the natural minor scale. Major, on the other hand, sounds happy, bright, and uplifting. Of course, these are just generalizations, and the scales can be used in different contexts to create different sounds. But there's no denying that they're restrictive, as each of them only have 7 notes and don't make use of the full 12-note range of Western music. Strictly obeying to the limits of any one of these scales can and does sometimes make for a great song, but it's also interesting to move away from them sometimes. For this reason, musicians and composers have turned to methods that incorporate notes and chords that are non-diatonic, which basically means not native to the specified key. For example, if I'm playing in C major and I play an F sharp, I've just played a note that is not included in the C major scale, and therefore this note is non-diatonic. Though musicians use non-diatonic notes and chords in many ways, which I can discuss in other videos, one way in which they do it is simply by using the chromatic scale. The scale on its own doesn't really conjure up any specific emotions other than a general rising, falling feeling. And so it isn't common to find songs that are built entirely around the chromatic scale because those songs would have no key center and would therefore run the risk of sounding too aimless or unstable. Instead, musicians will find clever ways to incorporate the chromatic scale into music just enough so that the music stays cohesive while also being interesting and imaginative enough to venture away from the key center. Of course, if musicians just threw the chromatic scale into their pieces at random moments, this might not be the most satisfying sound. And so composers and performers from all genres have had to find engaging ways to use chromaticism while still creating artistically coherent pieces of music. And so today, I'll be going over some of the ways that other composers do it, and also giving you tips on how to do it in your music. One simple way that composers integrate chromaticism into their melodies and solos is by using what are called chromatic approach notes. Chromatic approach notes are simply non-diatonic notes which approach the note that a melody is leading to. This term is used heavily in the context of jazz, and specifically jazz guitar, and it usually just means inserting a note into a melody that's 1/2 step away from where the melody is going to land. For example, if your melody went like this, inserting a chromatic approach note may look something like this. The note that we're adding is non-diatonic, and it is a 1/2 step away from our landing note. It gives our melody a bit more color and allows us to step away from the key center a little bit. Let's take another melody, this one from the movie La La Land. And create an example of how we could give this melody a chromatic approach note. As you can see, the melody we have right now is completely diatonic, and it stays faithful to the 3 sharps that the key of A major has. However, let's see what would happen if we changed the melody slightly and inserted a C natural right before this C sharp that the melody lands on. The C natural is non-diatonic and gives the melody a little bit more color. Now, this is not to say that the melody is somehow better with chromatic approach notes, or even that your melody will be better with chromatic approach notes, but just that it can add some variation and some surprise to the direction of your melody. An example of how a composer might do this is in Philip Glass's The Hours, which was part of the soundtrack for the film. Glass establishes this simple chord progression in the key of C major and repeats it twice with basically no variation. However, the third time the chord progression plays, there's a subtle adjustment that Glass makes where the G major chord that we have here shortly becomes a G augmented chord. And the D sharp at the top of this chord leads chromatically into the next note, E, which is part of the C major chord that the progression is moving to. Though it's only a small adjustment of one note, I think it gives this section of the piece a bit of extra tension and pull than it otherwise would have had if it just stayed diatonic. Next, let's take Chopin's most famous piece, his second nocturne in E-flat major, where he makes a great use of chromatic approach notes. Here in measure 11, we see these clusters of chromatic notes which cascade into each other but also lift the melody as a whole until landing on the note B-flat. First is this cluster, which moves chromatically from B natural to D-flat. Then another two notes, F and E, which are chromatic but fit the context. Then A-flat and G, and then this final breath that smoothly leads us into our B-flat. Chopin essentially takes the concept of chromatic approach notes and extends them across the whole measure to get where he's going. This shows us that there really is no limitations to using chromatic approach notes, so wherever you think they'll sound good, you should use them. To find out where they do sound good, I think it's important to experiment and not be afraid to play things that at first don't really make sense. Throwing in random chords or notes while writing your piece can help you flesh out ideas. For example, if you're writing a song in C major, it might not seem logical to throw an E augmented chord in there, but here's Rex Orange County doing it and making his song more interesting. Another thing you can do is have more than one chromatic approach note, and either ascend or cascade into your melody with multiple of them. In Bernard Herrmann's main theme for his Taxi Driver score, there's a great example of this. The melody cascades down from E flat to C, giving us that characteristically chromatic falling feel. One final example of this is in Nino Rota's La Dolce Vita, where the melody is constantly using chromaticism, starting with a walk from C to D over some chord changes. And then from D to E. And then finally a resolution, which has no chromaticism in it. Rota uses chromatics to give a sort of unresolved feel before letting the melody finally land. Chromatic movement in bass lines is another way that composers move away from the key center of their piece. You see this especially in the minor key, where we often walk down chromatically from the tonic, and that gives us a sort of melancholic but still powerful feeling, as though the bass is being pulled down helplessly. One example of this is the forbidden Led Zeppelin lick, which of course I can't play on YouTube, but you can see it here that the A moves down chromatically all the way to F. This is a really common sound in a lot of different styles of music, and especially in jazz. We can see it here in Duke Ellington's In a Sentimental Mood, in Richard Rodgers' My Funny Valentine,
My funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine.
and even in some modern contexts, like in this section of Rex Orange County's song Happiness. This technique can also be used in the major key in nearly the same way, and though it often works in tandem with secondary dominance, which I'll discuss in my next video, it's easy to understand what this might look like.
It doesn't come that easy anyway. Every time I try, it never feels the way it did at the start.
One final thing to note about chromatic movement in bass lines is that I think it can go upwards, but it's not that common outside the context of secondary dominance, and so the only example I could really find was this theme from the Flight Attendant show. But like with chromatic approach notes, I think the same lesson can be taken away, that you just have to mess around until you find something that sounds good. To To transition us from looking at chromatic movement and bass lines, I think the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme, written by Luciano Michelini, is the perfect way to introduce us to chromatic modulation. Chromatic modulation is moving the key of a song to a key that is one half step away. The Curb theme, titled Frolic, is a perfect example of how chromatic modulation can help us to avoid sounding too major or too minor in our music. And although the song is technically in a major key and modulates between major keys, it sounds more comedic or silly than it does happy or uplifting. The main motif starts in C major and sounds like this. At this point, we already have chromatic movement when moving from the C major chord to the B major chord, and we get some in the melody where we get that walk down from B to A. But to go even further, we then move down another half step to the key of B flat major. This is a perfect example of chromatic modulation, moving the key of the song a half step down, and then a half step down again, until finally coming all the way back to the original key. However, coming back to the original key is not always how chromatic modulation looks. For example, if we listen to the end of Adele's song All I Ask, we see her move from the key of E major to the key of F major to never return.
And I ain't asking for forgiveness. All I ask is if this is my
It seems like this kind of chromatic modulation is more about giving the song a sudden surprise or burst of energy. Here's some other songs that use chromatic modulations like this.
I bet that place you take a look at yourself and make that shine. Starting with the man in the mirror. They tell me it's summer and the sun shines it, and all the nights that I cry. They tell me it's summer, so I look to the sky.
My personal favorite way that composers use chromaticism is just to create textures. Now, I've found that this is mostly present in classical music from the Romantic period, but it's definitely not limited to that genre. For instance, the band Incubus has a track called Battlestar Scratch Lactica, where the bassist quickly lays down this sinking bass thing. This short section being so loose and off-tempo kind of leaves people wondering where the song is going next, and I think it creates an interesting open-ended texture. While I'm sure you guys could find some more examples of this in other styles of music, I think looking at the way it's used in classical music is easier to digest and just more fun. Maurice Ravel, who's perhaps the king of texture creation in classical music, uses a short but effective chromatic motif at the beginning of this first movement of his Mother Goose orchestral suite. What I love about this is that you can't totally put your finger on how the music makes you feel. The trill on the violin makes us feel a little bit restless, but this chromatic motif that he does here seems to lift us up and put us down whenever it wants. Even when the music finally becomes more grounded and the playful woodwind harmonies come in, Ravel still uses this motif in the background. Another composer who's known for his use of chromatic and atonal textures is Bela Bartok, whose first of his 4 orchestral pieces demonstrates this. Here in measure 33, we get this clash of 3 chromatic notes at once, and it gives us this extremely unsettling and even scary feeling that I've definitely heard in a couple horror movies. Though we could talk about Bartok's perfect orchestration at length, for now, let's just look at how the violins and the piano create this dissonant collision using the notes C sharp, D, and E flat all at the same time. If you go to your piano and you play these notes, and you go up the octave with them, you get the sound that Bartok uses in this section. This method of using chromaticism to create dissonant textures can help composers to make their music more interesting. More than any other method of incorporating chromaticism, this method is the one where you really do just need to mess around until something sounds good. I know I've been saying it for the whole video, but it's 100% true that some of the best music that you've heard has been created by accident or just from messing around. This process of toying with our instruments until we get something that sounds good is just part of being a composer. And I think you'll find that in the long run, chromaticism is really useful and a great technique to make your music sound better. As I mentioned earlier, chromaticism as a composition device goes far beyond the range of techniques that I've discussed in this video. Still, this video just aims to go over the basic ways that composers use chromaticism and not go too far into the technicalities of it. However, if you enjoyed and want to learn more about it, stick around and subscribe because I plan to make more videos like this, analyzing music and detailing other composition techniques. And if you want to know what's going on behind the music you listen to, leave a comment and let me know, and I'll do my best to incorporate it in a future video. Thanks again for watching, and continue making music.